evening, everyone. Welcome to the expert session today. My name is Keyur and I take care of outreach and programs at GeoSec. So the webinar is brought to you by GeoSec, which is India's leading startup support system, which has set a benchmark by facilitating startups at 0-day, zero-cost policy. In the span of 4 years, we have supported more than 200 plus startups and currently have more than 120 startups incubated with us. Our startups have cumulatively crossed 8 crores of revenues and have generated more than 600 jobs till date. So we support our startups by providing them free co-working space, mentoring access, access to government grants, funding opportunity from investors, IPR filing support, access to laboratories, as well as infrastructure support of Gujarat University ecosystem. So currently we are running an accelerator program in partnership with UNICEF for COVID-19 solutions. So more details can be found out on our website, which is www.geosec.edu.in. So with this, I would like to introduce the speaker. So Vednaran heads the SMB business practice at Razorpay and has built and grown multiple digital brands across health tech, ed tech, and online travel like startups like Healthify Me, Simply Learn, Stayzilla, CBazaar, and many more. In addition, he works with early stage startups and acceleration programs on branding and digital marketing. He also happens to be a visiting faculty member at various top schools in India, which includes IIM Bangalore, Indore, and Kashipur, where he conducts programs on digital marketing, mobile marketing, and influencer marketing. So with this, I would like to hand over the session to Veda. Over to you, Veda.
Thanks, Keyur. A very good evening to all of the participants here. Thank you so much for taking time off. I know you guys must be very busy. I really appreciate you guys turning up for this webinar. A big thank you to GeoSec for giving me this opportunity. And a big thank you once again to all of the attendees for sparing 2 hours of their valuable time for making it to this meeting. Let me quickly share my screen and we can get started. Is everyone able to see my screen? Keyur, are you able to see mine?
Yes.
Got it. So how are we going to handle the Q&A? I assume we'll handle the questions at the end. So people can keep putting out their questions in the Q&A section and we'll handle all of those together at the end. Does that work?
Sure. I also have curated few questions from the RSVP form that we floated.
Sure.
So we have 4 to 6 questions from that as well.
Awesome. So let's go over the presentation, which I think should take us close to around an hour, 15 minutes, 1 hour, 30 minutes odd. And then we'll get to the Q&A at the end. So as Keyur mentioned, I take care of the SMB business practice at Razorpay, which is the smaller medium business practice. I'm sure most of you here must have heard of Razorpay. I'm just trying to move this to the side. Just give me one moment. Yeah, I'm sure most of you here must have heard of Razorpay. Previously, as Keyur mentioned, have led marketing for multiple e-commerce companies. Razorpay, as most of you would know, provides end-to-end payment solutions for small and medium businesses and for large enterprises. I take care of the SMB business practice, which is a practice for small and medium businesses and for early stage startups. I take care of both sales and marketing there. Today, over the next hour and a half or so, we're going to talk about what it is to actually acquire customers digitally and how do you actually maintain relationships and engage with your audiences in a completely digital world, in a completely virtual world, a world that is becoming increasingly more so virtual in the current scenario, in the current context of COVID. People are getting distanced in the real world, but are actually coming closer digitally. So in this kind of a context, how do you actually acquire more customers for your business? And how do you actually engage and nurture your existing customer and prospect relationships? That is going to be our topic and focus today. So over the next hour and a half or so, what we're going to do is we're going to look at we'll do a quick sneak peek into the evolution of digital in India as a whole. That's something that we will look at. We'll look at how the growth of digital has actually happened in India over the last few years and what have been some of the key milestone events in the last 1 year, especially in the last 1 year. I think most of us would be aware of the growth of digital over the last several years. We'll look at what have been some of the key milestones that have dictated the growth of digital in India, especially over the last 1 year or so. We'll also look at some Razorpay specific data. So Razorpay, as I mentioned, essentially you can think of it as an index fund which sits on top of the entire SMB ecosystem in India. And Razorpay has a ringside perspective to actually have a point of view on the goings on in the entire SMB ecosystem in India. Because we process payments for more than 800,000 SMBs and startups in the country. So what I will do is I will give you a quick sneak peek into some Razorpay data, which will give you a sense of what has been the impact of COVID on the SMB and the startup ecosystem in the country. We'll also look at some remote work best practices. We'll then dive into what are some of the key startup engines you need to focus on from a growth perspective if you are an early stage startup. Right, and as an early stage startup founder who may not necessarily be from a digital marketing background, you guys must be bombarded with a bunch of jargons, right? SEO, SEM, Google advertising, Facebook advertising. We'll also look at some rules of thumb which can help you decipher a lot of these things and which can help you prioritize your digital marketing work. I previously have led marketing for one of India's leading health tech companies and for one of India's leading edtech companies. So, and these are two sectors which have seen a significant upsurge because of COVID. Both health tech and edtech have significantly grown during this time of COVID because people want to take care of their health needs online, people want to learn online. So I will actually take you through a couple of mini caselets on the growth stories behind what is today India's largest health tech app, what is today India's one of largest edtech apps. We'll also look at the importance of engagement. People quite often, when we think of marketing, they think of acquisition, right? Fresh acquisition, new customer acquisition. We'll also look at what it is to actually engage with prospects who are already a part of your funnel. What do you need to do? What are the tricks of the trade that you need to know? I'll also take you through a failure that we actually went through during one of my early days when I was leading marketing for a fairly popular niche Indian ethnic wear player, which was in the fashion space, where we actually struggled with customer engagement. So that is another caselet that I will talk through as we go along. Very quickly, hope everyone is able to hear me all right. Keyur, are you able to hear me all right? Everybody, all fine? Infrastructurally able to hear me all right?
Yes, everything is perfect.
Awesome. Awesome. The great Indian digital story. As I said, most of us are aware of the journey, the digital journey that the country has been through over the last several years, over the last decade or so. But especially in the last year and a half or so, India has crossed quite a few key milestones pretty quietly. We crossed over 500 million active internet users last year. I think this is again a data that a lot of you might be aware. This number is currently trending at close to 750 million now. It's close to 750 as it stands. Now, a significant epochal moment that happened in 2019 was till 2019, Google search, and in India, search essentially means Google search because Google has almost a monopoly, right? It's almost 100% market share. It's around 97, 98% market share of the search market in India. So till 2019, every Indian, the majority of Indians, the first baby step they took before entering the World Wide Web was via Google search. Now in 2019, this changed. Now Google search was no longer the first step. Google search was not the first natural entry point for Indians making an entry into the World Wide Web. It is actually apps. It is actually the Google Play Store. Now that is a significant change for businesses who are looking to go after digital audiences, right? So no longer is search your numero uno, but the app ecosystem is your number one. That's something which is very important that a lot of businesses need to recognize. The other important point, as most of you know, Facebook has more than 300 million users in India. This number, again, this is slightly dated by a year. This number is close to 400 million today. Another very significant milestone event that happened over the last 12 months is the fact that what you see here is the classic marketing funnel, right? Where prospects move from awareness, wherein they are aware of a particular brand or product, to consideration, wherein they actually consider a set of brands or products to be in a long list of consideration brands. From that, they move into evaluation, wherein from a long list of brands, they shortlist a certain smaller set of brands to whom they have a strong affinity towards before they make the eventual act of purchase, which is action. Now, historically, till 1 year back in India, despite the growth of digital, television was the #1 channel for driving awareness, right? It was not any of these digital platforms. But in the last year or so, television has now taken the second stage. It is not these digital channels. I assume all of these icons are fairly well recognized and they don't require any introduction. So it is actually YouTube and Instagram, which are the #1 for building awareness for brands in India in 2020. Before I move on, let me just see, there are a bunch of chats which are coming through. Let me just see if anything needs my attention right now.
Oh, no. I wrote down some of the things.
Sure. I think that I just noticed a quick question. By monopoly, what I mean is somebody who has complete and total control of a market. So for example, Google, in Google's case, it is a monopoly because people only, in India, people only use Google search for any kind of internet search. In other parts of the world, there are other search engines at play as well. So it is not a monopoly. It is a multipoly, so to speak, or a duopoly in some cases where you have 2 or more players. In India, search, it essentially comes down to 1 player. Yahoo search, etc. is very, very low. Yahoo, Bing search, etc., which is why I said it's a monopoly. Before we move on, let me give you a quick sneak peek. I'm assuming a lot of you guys, a lot of you people, a lot of you founders would be pretty nervous about the impact of COVID on the ecosystem. We don't really know when this is going to flatten out and what the new normal is going to be like. But there are some lotuses in the pond. That's something that at Razorpay we've had the fortune of actually observing, because as I said, we have the opportunity to have a ringside perspective into the goings on in the SMB ecosystem in India. So from the basis, the data that we have gathered, what we can see is that what you see here is 4 different pie charts, which essentially give you a business category breakdown of all of the new SMB acquisitions that we have done in each of these respective periods. This is for February 2020. This is for March 2020. This is for the first 2 weeks, last week of February to the first week of March. Then the first 2 weeks of the lockdown. This was the time when the lockdown was first announced, the last week of March to the first week of April. What this gives you is the industry-wide breakdown of all of the SMBs that Razorpay has onboarded and people who have begun transacting and receiving funds via the Razorpay platform. As you can see, before the lockdown, e-commerce was the numero uno. More than 30% of our fresh acquisitions were from the e-commerce space. But during the time of lockdown, what has actually happened is that EdTech and health tech have significantly grown. They now occupy the #1 and #2 slots, followed by e-commerce, which is very significant. So while at an overall level, Razorpay has not seen a decline in terms of numbers, there has been a decline in e-commerce, and that has been substituted by upticks in health tech and in EdTech. Yeah, a quick snapshot of some remote work best practices that have worked well for us at Razorpay. I just thought I'll give you a quick sneak peek of that. Right now, over the last couple of months or so, all of us here at Razorpay have been working remote, and we use all of these different platforms. We're using Zoom webinar right now. We use Zoom extensively at Razorpay, despite a lot of the security concerns which have been put out around Zoom. As long as you have the password facility and you make sure that every single person who joins into a meeting is forced to enter a password, you're all good. A lot of those security issues do not apply, so I would certainly recommend that. WhatsApp is now our fallback. It is no longer the #1 place, go-to place for reaching somebody for for a professional ask. One of the problems that we've had is that a lot of people have started complaining of burnout. Earlier, there was a lot of work for home, which was also happening in addition to work from home. But with work from home now becoming the new normal, with everybody working from home, people are noticing that they hardly have any time for themselves during the workday, and people have actually started complaining of burnout. And that's something which has come to our attention. People do get disengaged. People's calendars get blocked out during the entire day with literally no breathing space available at all, which has proved to be another huge cause of concern. And with a plethora of digital platforms out there, you've got email, you've got Slack, you've got WhatsApp, people get bombarded from all of these different channels. So the challenge for us has been to ensure that we do allow people to be able to carve out time for themselves, not just for themselves, carve out some thinking time on their calendars, and we have actively encouraged people to actually do this. Now we're going to take a slight tangent. It's a fork in the road. Now what we're going to do, so far what we've seen is what's been happening in the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem overall. I showed you some data points, some key milestone events that the Indian digital ecosystem has gone through. over the last year and a half or so. I also took you through what have been some of the observations that we have made at Razorpay after the onset of COVID. How has that compared to what was the scenario before COVID came in, right? How has COVID impacted the SMB ecosystem overall, the small and medium business ecosystem overall, and the startup ecosystem overall? Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at from a digital marketing perspective, what are some of the key core early stage startup growth hacks that you could look at? What are some of the key things that you need to have in place? And I will also give you some rules of thumb which can help you make some prioritization decisions. Yeah. Now, one of the biggest questions that must be facing you as a founder, you must be getting bombarded with these acronyms and terminologies and jargons, SEM, SEO, Facebook. How do you prioritize it, right? From an acquisition perspective, as an early stage startup, you've got limited bandwidth, you've got limited resources, you've got limited money. How do you prioritize your mind space, your bandwidth on specific things which can actually give you the maximum bang for buck? Right? And it's not a question of either or, it is essentially a question of prioritization. What do you make? Here's your number one priority. Here's a quick rule of thumb which can actually help answer a lot of these questions for you. The first question you ask yourself is, the product or the category in which I operate in, is that mass or is that niche? That's the first question you ask yourself. So obviously, if you're an early stage startup, you would not necessarily be operating in a mass category, but you could. By this, what I essentially mean is, is a product that you sell, is this possibly a polka dotted small fish, a striped fish, which is living in a very, very large pond, so to speak? So essentially, are you a slightly small variant operating in a large category, or are you a very, very unique offering which is operating in a category of their own, in a very, very niche space, in a very small pond? That's a key question you've got to ask yourself. So essentially, are you selling maybe silk t-shirts, for example? So essentially you are still selling t-shirts, although there is something unique about you. Or are you selling, say, for example, sherwanis online, which makes it completely niche and unique? So that's the first question you've got to ask yourself. Now, there are two ways in which you can answer this question. Now, the first is a pure gut-based approach. You as the founder, as the CEO, would have a certain gut which says that the space in which you are operating in is mass, is niche, which is a very subjective viewpoint. The other way is to also overlay that with some objectivity, wherein you actually look at Google Keyword Planner. I'm sure most of you have heard of Google AdWords, and you know that Google AdWords, which is completely free, provides a free tool called Google Keyword Planner, right? So you also use Google Keyword Planner and enter the category in which you're operating in. Let's say you're trying to sell saris online, you're trying to sell sherwanis online, or you're trying to teach or prepare students for the chartered accountant examination online, the CA exam online, you're doing EdTech. So you can search for specific keywords like these on Google Keyword Planner, and the tool will actually tell you how much of demand is out there for your search keyword. Now, not all of us are Amazon, right? Not all of us are Amazon. We don't have the ability to be able to create demand. But what you can do is you can piggyback on existing demand which is out there, and you can try to grow your business. So if there are enough volumes of people who are already searching for keywords which are present in your category, buy saris online, buy sherwanis online, for example, then you make Google as your number one priority. So if the demand is already existing on Google search, right? If there are people already searching for your category, then you make Google as your number one priority. If people are not, then you've got to ask yourself an additional question. If the space in which you operate in is very, very niche, there are not enough people who are actually operating, who are actually searching for your particular keyword, then you've got to look at an additional question. Let me give you an example. 10 years back, nobody was searching for book taxi online before Ola and Uber started. Right? So at that point in time, there was no demand for booking taxis online, right? So for Ola and Uber back then to have prioritized Google would have been a mistake, because there's nobody searching for these things on Google. So you can, instead of trying to artificially create demand, you should not be going after the Google. What you instead should be doing is you should ask yourself an additional question. Is the category in which I operate in, is that high engagement? Does it have a high visual quotient? Now, this is an interesting question for you to ask. Now, a lot of people confuse high engagement with high frequency of usage. These are not the same things. Ola is an example of an app which in normal circumstance before COVID, people would have used 100 times a month, right? But it is not high engagement because it is extremely transactional, the relationship. But if somebody is having a Myntra app, or if somebody is having, say, the Healthify Me app, for example, I don't know how many of you have heard of Healthify Me. It is an app that helps you track your calories. It's an app that helps you more mindful of your eating habits, workout habits. So you track all the calories you've consumed, all the calories you've burnt. All of these are examples of high engagement apps. People spend a lot of quality time in engaging with these apps, be it a Myntra, be it a Healthify Me, not so much on an Ola, which is more transactional. They use it a lot. Yes, the frequency of usage is very high, but the engagement is low. So if you are operating in a category like fashion, like health tech, where it is high engagement, and you also have the opportunity to make your marketing communication very visually compelling by including testimonials of customers who talk about, so for example, at Healthify Me, all of our communication would involve testimonials of customers who have seen weight loss, who have seen health gains after actually using the Healthify Me app. Myntra obviously puts in a lot of very rich visuals of good-looking models dressed in very good-looking clothes. So you have the opportunity to inject a very strong visual element in your communication. Then you prioritize Facebook. So if you're operating in a niche space, so if you're operating in a mass space with the existing demand, you prioritize Google. If that is not the case, if you're operating in a niche space with high engagement, that's very important, and you have the chance to inject very strong visual element in your communications, then you prioritize Facebook. Now, the next point in the flowchart, if it is niche, but it is low engagement, then what do you do? Like in the Ola example that I gave you, right? In the Ola and the Uber example, it's not an engaging thing, right? Nobody engages with a taxi booking app. Nobody engages with Redbus. Nobody engages with a Make My Trip. If they're doing a holiday planning, yes, but if they're trying to book flight tickets, not so much, right? It's a very transactional thing. Then what you do is you go back to Google and you prioritize SEO, which is search engine optimization, which essentially is how can you make sure that you go after miscellaneous keywords, which are not directly aligned to your category, which are kind of tangential to your category, but on which you can still create content on, and through which you can start driving demand and building demand for your overall category. For example, if you're say trying to sell Sherwani online and there is not enough search volume for not enough people are actually searching for Sherwanis online, what you could do is you talk about men's fashion in general, right? Which is not directly related to Sherwanis, but it is kind of bordering or neighboring to the category in which you're operating in. So you talk about men's fashion in general, and you create a lot of rich content around men's fashion. You create a lot of blogs around men's fashion, and then you try to interlink and backlink the traffic back to your Sherwani product page. That's what you do. So I hope that was useful. Essentially, just to quickly summarize, what you do is your quick rule book is ask yourself the question, the category in which I am operating in, is that niche, is that mass? If it's mass, very simple, go down Google's path. If it is niche, ask yourself an additional question, is it high engagement and can I inject a very strong visual element in my communication? If the answer to that is yes, go down Facebook. If the answer to that is no, then you go after SEO. You go after Google again, but you do not spend money on Google in search engine marketing or advertising. You just try to create content so you can drive traffic organically for free, so to speak. You tried creating content for larger ecosystem related keywords, which are kind of neighboring to the business category in which you operate in. If you are in the B2B space, for example, instead of Facebook, replace Facebook with LinkedIn. LinkedIn needs to be a #1 channel. So the entire rule of thumb stays the same for B2B, except you replace Facebook with LinkedIn as your #1 channel. Just keep that in mind. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at a quick snapshot of what worked at Healthify Me, which today happens to be India's largest health tech app with over 10 million users. I used to lead marketing for them for a long time. So we're going to look at what were some of the key ingredients in the success recipe for Healthify Me. So Healthify Me was and still happens to be an app first and an app only company, right? It does not do any business through their website. So we only used to do mobile marketing. So from a mobile marketing perspective, the key things that worked for us, number one was Facebook advertising. Now, when I joined Healthify Me, it was a big culture shock for me. Because till then, Facebook for me had never worked as a dhanda driving, hard-working performance marketing channel. It had always worked only as a brand building vehicle. And it was always Google search, Google advertising. That was my dhanda driving channel. The dhande wali channel was always Google for me. But for the first time ever, Facebook was actually driving dhanda and was the number one at driving dhanda at Healthify Me. And the reasons are exactly what I told you before, right? Healthify Me operates in the health tech space, which promotes very strong engagement from consumers, which gives the brand a very strong opportunity to inject a very strong visual element in the entire marketing storytelling narrative. Which is why Facebook was the number one channel for us from an acquisition perspective for customer acquisition. The second one was Google. So Google offers something called as Universal App Campaigns, UAC campaigns, which is the only way, if you're having an app for which you want to drive installs for which you want to drive downloads for, then you've got to use Google UAC campaigns. For a long time, Google UAC never worked for us. But over a period of time, as we started scaling and as we started sending more and more data to Google, the Google UAC campaign started getting better. There were multiple kinds of targeting matrices that we used to employ here. One was regular targeting, right? I know who are my key consumers. So I would give Facebook and Google a targeting matrix that said, go after people living in metros, aged about 30 years, who have liked some kind of a health and fitness page before. That is one way. The other way is, I see that there are around 80 people or so who have signed into the webinar today. Let's say that all the 80 of you have transacted with me in the past week, in the past month. So what I would tell Google and Facebook is, here Google and Facebook, here are the anonymized details of these 80 people who are my recently transacting customers. Now go find me 800,000 more of these who are clones of these 80 people, who share very similar demographic and geographic characteristics to these 80 people. Go find me more of this 80. So which is why I call these targeting matrices. The first one is the outside in kind of a targeting approach, wherein I actually define what is the kind of targeting matrix I need to provide. The second is an inside out, wherein I use my own data source of truth to actually determine and actually inform Facebook and Google what are the kind of customers I need. The third thing, a lot of you might not have heard of this term. It's called ASO, which is called App Store Optimization. You can think of it as SEO, Search Engine Optimization's cousin in the app world. A lot of you would have heard of SEO. ASO is the exact equivalent of that in the App Store world. How do you make sure that you have the right kind of keywords, the right kind of visual elements in your iTunes or your Play Store listing to maximize downloads, right? Maximize views for people searching for relevant keywords which are related to your business. The entire stream of work. So ASO is something that worked really well for us. So even when it came down to a cash crunch at Healthify Me, we were still not able to lose any acquisition momentum because we had a very strong organic acquisition engine going through our ASO efforts. The other key thing was in-app marketing. So we built out a lot of product funnels in place within the app. So for example, if there are specific cohorts of consumers who are spending a lot of time on the app, what we used to do is that we used to have specific hooks within the app to actually move them forward in their entire life cycle journey. So we used to give maybe a 7-day free trial, right? Or we used to give specific people a free diet consultation with one of our top nutritionists. Things like these, which essentially would move people forward in their entire life cycle journey. So Healthify Me, like a lot of apps out there, was a freemium app. What do you mean by freemium? There are certain aspects of the app which are free. Like for example, calorie counting, that's completely free. You can count your calories. I had idli today morning. I had puri, I had pav bhaji today morning, right? And I consumed, and the app will tell you how many calories you actually consumed. I did 10 Surya Namaskars today morning. I did 100 push-ups in the morning. So all of this information can be logged on the app and it's completely free, right? So it becomes your daily diary of sorts from a health perspective. What we also did on top of that is we also provided a premium offering, wherein we would have coaches who provide personalized diet, fitness, and yoga plans basis each and every user's health goals. So we used to move people from free to premium basis a lot of these in-app marketing hooks that I just mentioned. Email marketing, again, goes without saying. That's something that we used to do a lot of. And this is something that I would encourage all of you guys to do. This is called Accelerated Mobile Pages, also in short referred to as AMP. This is a new architectural infrastructural guideline which is provided by Google for all mobile pages which render on browsers, for making mobile pages load really fast to reduce latency. So in fact, Google provides this offering for free for a lot of startups. So you can reach out to your contacts at Google to actually get this information. This information is available for free. This is like a must have if you have to rank higher and higher on mobile SEO. So just keep this in mind as well. These were the things that worked well for us at Healthify Me, which today happens to be India's leading health tech app. Moving on, that was more from a acquisition perspective. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at things from a engagement or a relationship management perspective. What are the key things for you to keep in mind? It's one thing to actually acquire new customers. It's quite another to actually maintain, engage, and nurture and foster relationships with the people who are actually a part of your marketing funnel. How do you achieve that? So relationship management, engagement, nurturing essentially is about working with your current pipeline of leads. People have already entered your marketing funnel. How do you work with them? How do you engage them? How do you nurture them and handhold them through their entire prospect lifecycle journey? That's what we're talking about. Now, as a startup founder, again, the same question comes up. How much priority do I need to give for engagement and nurturing and for relationship management with prospects? Should I just focus on acquisition? There are multiple rules of thumb for you to keep in mind. Again, there are various variables which go into determining how strong or otherwise relationship management, engagement and nurturing of your prospects needs to feature on your priority stack. The first one is, are you operating in a category which is mature or nascent? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're trying to sell, you're on Amazon, for example, you run an e-commerce marketplace where you sell things online, versus you're actually trying to sell education online, right? You're an edtech company versus an e-commerce company. If you're an e-commerce company, it is a fairly mature space. Consumers have lesser and lesser questions. Thanks to Amazon and Flipkart and the billions of dollars that they have splurged in advertising and educating India's consumer masses, the space per se is fairly mature, as opposed to edtech, right? People are going to have 10,000 questions. Let's say you're trying to sell digital marketing courses online, or you're trying to sell IIT coaching online. You're providing IIT coaching online. People are going to have so many different questions. So if you think about it at the most fundamental philosophical level possible, the need for engagement, nurturing, and relationship management is directly proportional to the number of questions your prospects are going to have. So if you're operating in a mature space, consumers are going to have lesser questions. If you're operating in a nascent space, consumers are going to have more questions. So you need to engage and nurture them that much more. Of course, everything else being the same, if you're a brand which is extremely popular, which is extremely omnipresent, consumers are going to have lesser questions because they trust you that much more, because your brand is more recognizable. So that again is something that influences how much importance you need to accord for engagement and nurturing. Your average selling price, ASP, stands for average selling price. What is the average price at which you're selling your products? Is it $500? Is it $10,000? So again, coming back to the same example, if you're on Amazon, your average selling price is still less than 1,000, despite Amazon's efforts at pushing washing machines. But if you're trying to sell, say, digital courses online, your average selling prices are upwards of $10,000, which is a pretty heavy investment. So the higher or the more expensive the product, the more the questions consumers are going to have, the more is the need for engagement and nurturing. Your sales conversion cycles, that again is a key determinant. What do I mean by sales conversion cycle? For Domino's, the sales conversion cycle is possibly 30 minutes. How long on an average does a prospect take for converting into becoming a paying customer? That's what a sales conversion cycle means. So for a Domino's, from the time somebody enters their mobile number on the Domino's website to the time they place the order, it's probably less than half an hour, right? It's probably 10 minutes. But for an Infosys, for example, which operates in the B2B space, sales conversion cycles are upwards of 1.5, 2 years, 3 years in a lot of cases, right? So, and which is usually the case in B2B. So the longer your sales conversion cycles, the longer your prospects are going to be a part of your sales life cycle, the greater is the need for you to engage and nurture them with regular customized content as they move through this entire journey. right? That's something which is important for you to keep in mind. B2B versus B2C, because that again takes into account a lot of these. B2B usually has long conversion cycles. B2B usually has high ASPs. So that again addresses. So everything else being the same, if you are operating in a B2B space, you have a greater need for engagement and nurturing and relationship management. Service versus product is an interesting one, because if you talk about service, you essentially talk about lesser levels of standardization, because if it's service, you have a human element that comes in. So if you're talking about Amazon, it is primarily product that you're buying, right? The service component is limited to how long it takes for you to get that product delivered to your house, right? It's just limited to that. But if you're, say, learning something online, if you're, say, operating in an edtech space, well, of course, you do provide course content which is standardized. A significant part of your brand's value proposition is determined by the quality of the instructor, right? Which is where the service component comes in. And each instructor is different from the other. So you have a lot of non-standardization coming in. Excuse me. Which increases the number of questions your consumers are going to have, as opposed to somebody who provides a pure product-based offering or primarily a product-based offering. They would have a lesser need for engagement and nurturing. This point number 7 is again related to point number 6, the level of standardization that you actually provide in your entire offering. So as I said, lead engagement and nurturing, welcome to the world of lead engagement and nurturing. It's extremely important, especially in this day and age of COVID, where austerity is the primary mantra. Marketing dollars are going to be hard to come by. All businesses, startups, SMBs, and large multinational companies are looking to conserve cash. So you are going to have limited marketing dollars available for actually spending in fresh acquisition. So what you have to do is to make sure that the leads that you have already acquired, you make them work harder for you. You do a good job of engaging and nurturing those leads and make them actually drive value for your business. A quick snapshot. So all of the efforts that you as a business undertake to actually engage, nurture, handhold your audiences, and automating your entire series of marketing touch points and marketing communications through email, through SMS, through WhatsApp, through browser notifications, etc., can be done through platforms called marketing automation platforms. What you see here on the screen are a bunch of marketing automation platforms which help achieve a lot of these purposes. HubSpot, a lot of you would have heard this term. It happens to be the world's leading marketing automation platform. Acton is another fantastic platform, a platform that I would any day recommend. A platform which is more value for money. However, both HubSpot and Acton are pretty expensive. I would recommend a platform called Active Campaigns, which is a very, very popular value for money, popular with early stage startups, SMEs kind of a marketing automation platform. Active Campaigns. So essentially, you can actually stitch together user journeys as part of this marketing automation platform and say that once a lead enters my system, in the first day, I want the marketing automation platform to automatically send a welcome email. 3 days after that, I want the marketing automation platform to send out an email that gives a bunch of latest blog links. 2 days after that, I want the platform to send some customer testimonials, for example. 5 days after that, I want the platform to send maybe a discount code or a coupon code for converting that customer. So these are some marketing automation platforms that can help you automate all of these different actions across different channels. Now, here's an interesting question again. How can lead engagement and nurturing help your business? Yeah, that's something that all of us need to understand. There are, at the highest level possible, a couple of different ways, multiple ways, but if you were to try and aggregate and roll up all these different use cases into a couple of large level ones, there are 2 primary things that come in. One is lead engagement and nurturing can be a part of the transaction lifecycle itself for driving conversion. So for example, I am Simplilearn, for example. Most of you must have heard of the name Simplilearn. It happens to be one of India's leading provider of professional learning solutions for working professionals, digital marketing, data science, iOS programming, Android programming, etc. So let's say you join as a lead with Simplilearn. What's going to happen is that Simplilearn is going to engage and nurture you. On an average, Simplilearn knows that its leads take around 2 months to convert, around 1 month to convert. The sales life cycle is around 1 month. So over the next 2 to 3 weeks, From the time the lead has signed up with Simplilearn, Simplilearn would keep sending that lead a bunch of personalized emailers. So as part of their entire transaction lifecycle, they are trying to convert this lead into a paying customer. That is with Simplilearn, where the sales lifecycle is around 1 month. Very similar approach with the Infosys as well, right? Infosys has leads, which are lead life cycles, which stretch upwards of 1.5 to 2 years. So let's say a JP Morgan becomes a lead for an Infosys. Over the next 1.5 years or so, they are going to send a bunch of customized, high value content for a JP Morgan, which is going to engage and nurture them. The other way is, let's say you're Domino's. What do you do then? Right? Domino's leads life cycle is around 5 to 10 minutes. So you don't really have the time to use lead engagement and nurturing through email, through WhatsApp, through SMS to actually convert that prospect right then and there. As part of that transaction, you can't really make a difference because it's just 5 minutes. The window is so small. Yeah. So what you can though do is, let's say 1 week from now, I'm again feeling lazy to cook and I'm in the mood for pizza. And I'm looking to order pizzas again. Domino's can make sure that it stays top of mind for me. How? By sending me a regular series of emails. They know that I'm a vegetarian. They know that I like paneer toppings. They know that I love paneer top pizza. So they can keep sending me regular emailers after my transaction is done to make sure that they are top of mind for me the next time I'm thinking about ordering a pizza. So in cases where the sales life cycles are extremely short, like in the example, like in the case of a Domino's, like in the case of say flight booking with a Make My Trip, like in the case of say Amazon, where a lot of these purchases are impulse purchases, where the sales life cycles are extremely short, you can still use lead engagement and nurturing for driving stickiness, brand recall, and brand loyalty. The other way in which you can use lead engagement and nurturing is refunneling users. Let me give you an example of this. So here again, back at Simplilearn, we used to call a bunch of leads whom we used to acquire as quote unquote dead leads. These were leads who are perfectly right from a targeting perspective, but the sales team had tried their best and given up on, right? They were just not able to convert them. So what we used to do is that every 6 months or so, we used to take another stab at these leads and try to refunnel them back into our marketing funnel by saying that we've missed you. These are the 5 things we have done to improve our services. We would love to have you back, right? As a means of reactivation, very similar to Healthify Me as well, right? So many different people would have the Healthify Me app installed on their phones, but would never launch the app, right? So how do we make sure that we reactivate a lot of these previously hibernating users and get them to transact and engage again with the brand? That's the other purpose of lead engagement and nurturing. Now, I understand that most of you here would be founders. Most of you here are CEOs. And in pure dhanda terms, you would obviously want to understand, why do you need lead engagement and nurturing, or why do you need life cycle emailers, as they are called, wherein you send emailers to engage and nurture your lead over the entire life cycle of that particular lead through a marketing automation system? Why do I even need this? I just understand top line and bottom line, right? Why do I even need all this? That's a very valid question. There are 2 strong reasons why you need this. The first is, let's say that you've got a sales team, you're running a company, you've got a sales team, you've got a 2-member sales team, which is capable of possibly having conversations with, in a month, let's say 500 prospects. They work 10 hours a day for 25 days in a month, and they have basis their bandwidth, they possibly, let's assume, have the capability to have conversations only with 500 prospects in a given month. But let's say your lead pipeline is 2,000 strong. You've got 2,000 people in your lead pipeline. Now, how do you prioritize which are the top 500 from this 2,000 that your sales team needs to spend time with? How do you identify that? Your marketing automation system can actually help identify that by assigning lead scores basis the actions that each of these 2,000 people perform on your platform, which of these people actually engage with your emailers. They can actually inform the sales team on which are the ones they need to prioritize and they need to spend time with. So the marketing automation system will actually tell your sales team, saying these are the top 500 you need to spend time with, who have the maximum opportunity to convert. So this essentially means this has twin benefits, obviously, and like with any organization, I'm sure your companies are no different. The CEO's most favorite team is usually the sales team, because the CEO looks at the sales team and they see them as the people who are bringing in the money. The CEO's least favorite team is usually marketing, because the CEOs look at marketing as the guys who spend their money. So if you are giving the CEOs, and if this is an idea which can help increase the productivity of the sales team, that essentially means more money on the table. That essentially means greater top line. Because the sales team is now spending time only with qualified prospects, so to speak. So enhanced top line. The other advantage to this is that you're not troubling the remaining 1,500 people who are not interested in your product. You're only going after people who are interested. So you're also not damaging your own brand by going after irrelevant audiences. You're going after only relevant audiences. That's the other advantage, the other side to the coin. The other advantage behind all of this is that marketing automation primarily runs on email and SMS. And both of these platforms are significantly more cost effective than a Google or a Facebook. Right? So your marketing efficiency also significantly improves if you're going to rely on marketing automation systems for engaging and nurturing your leads instead of expensive Google or Facebook, which means your marketing spend is coming down, your cost of customer acquisition is coming down, and for the same marketing spend or for lesser, you're able to acquire more consumers for your business. So your bottom line improves because your costs are going down. Your EBITDA is actually looking better. Your earnings before tax, interest, tax, and depreciation is actually looking better. So these are the twin, very strong business reasons why you as a CEO should be looking at lead engagement and nurturing. Now, the other important thing, before I do that, let me just quickly have a time check. Okay, we're good on time. The other important thing that we need to keep in mind, and this is something that I learned the hard way back when I was leading marketing and product for one of India's leading online ethnic wear players. So here, this was a player which was a very, very strong fundamentals, business fundamentals, which is unlike a lot of top e-commerce companies in India today. This company actually had positive cash flows, and it had very strong gross margins, very strong EBITDA. But the problem with the business was it had very low repeats. So the business essentially sold to the Indian diaspora living abroad, NRIs living abroad, right? People living in North America, Canada, the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Middle East. These were and the usual Indian demographic hotspots within these countries, right? Texas, San Francisco, San Jose, New Jersey, Toronto. All of these were some of the top selling hotspots for this particular brand. And they sold lehengas, kurta, sherwanis, etc. to the Indian diaspora living abroad. Plus, they also used to customize a lot of these products, right? And the key, the unique selling proposition, the USP for this brand was that you do not have high quality tailoring options available if you're living in a Texas, if you're living in a Houston, if you're living in a New Jersey. And that's where they come in, right? They would take all of your measurements beforehand and they would customize the clothing and they would ship it to you, right? Which is a pretty compelling value prop. But the problem was people used to buy a $300, $400 lehenga or a sherwani for a marriage or for Diwali, and then they would never transact with the brand for the next 1.5 to 2 years. Yeah. So even though as a business, we were fundamentally very strong in terms of its, in terms of the key business metrics that mattered, in terms of the key cash flow elements that mattered, from a P&L perspective, we were actually healthy. But from an acquisition perspective, it was not a healthy business because as a business, we were fundamentally relying on new customers coming through the door, right? We were not having strong repeats. So we were having consumers coming in through one door and leaving through the other. So as a business, we were completely reliant on only new customers coming in, which makes your business, if your business is such, it makes it inherently a very risky business. And this is something for you to watch out for. So any business that you operate in, any space that you pick, for selling your product, make sure that you have very strong repeat behavior from consumers embedded as part of consumer behavior. That's something which is very important. As I said, venture capitalists found the business inherently risky because even though the business fundamentals were good, because we were only reliant on fresh acquisition. So the key questions that come in is what happens if you max out on your entire target consumer universe? What happens then? Because the NRI segment is also fairly limited. It's around 10-15 million strong. What happens after you reach the glass ceiling there? Because you're not having any repeat business and you don't have money to create new markets. So what are you going to do? So that was a case, that was an example of how we could not crack the repeats jigsaw puzzle. Now what I'm going to give you is an example of how we successfully cracked the repeat jigsaw puzzle. So fast forward around 7-8 years later, when I was leading marketing for one of the world's leading edtech players, we had a very similar problem statement. Our ASPs were our average selling prices were around 15,000 rupees, which is pretty high in the Indian context. And if somebody has just taken a digital marketing course and has spent 15,000 rupees in learning digital marketing, how do you convince the guy to come back and take another course with you? So the consumer behavior is very, very low. Unlike say an Ola, for example, where consumers repeat transact 100 times a month, possibly. Here, people repeat transacted only once in 2 years, right? Which is a problem for us. So we tackled this in a fairly innovative way, wherein we said that we are no longer providing learning solutions, but we are actually a career planner for you, and we are in the business of crafting a learning path. So if you, let's say Keyur is my prospect. Now I'm not just providing a digital marketing or a data science course for Keyur, but I am actually constructing a learning path for Keyur, right? So Keyur has just taken this digital marketing course from me, and he's at the bottom of the mountain, so to speak, and he wants to reach the peak, which is that aspirational CMO role, chief marketing officer role, for example, or a chief data scientist role that he's looking for. What I would do is I would tell Keyur that, Keyur, great, you've just taken this first course with me. You need to take these next 3 more courses to reach the peak of the mountain, right? So these are the courses you need to take. And for reaching the peak, you need to take something called as a master's program that we actually sold, which was sold at 3x the average selling price. This was being sold at 50,000 bucks. So we used to have the premium offering, which was also coupled as part of this entire learning path offering. And we targeted specific users who had already transacted with Simply Learn, and we used that as the hook for driving repeats. Over 2 to 3 quarters, we managed to push the envelope on repeats, and we improved the repeats percentage by almost 5x. From virtually nothing, we moved it to close to 20% of our transactions actually started coming through repeat behavior. This was a success story of how we actually managed to crack the repeats piece of the entire jigsaw puzzle.
So Veda, you just sold me.
That's good to know, Keyur. Yeah. And the word DRIP, again, this is an acronym that you guys must be hearing of pretty often. DRIP essentially refers to emailers, lifecycle emailers, essentially nothing much. Emailers which go after one after another, very similar to water dripping off a tap, drip after drip after drip. That's why lifecycle emailers are also popularly referred to as DRIP emailers. These are again sold through marketing automation platforms. We had various kinds of drips. One was what we called as a hot lead drip, right? Which essentially is the kind of emailer communication that used to go out to somebody whom we considered as a hot lead. Somebody who came to our course page, landing page, looked at the course syllabus, looked at the price, and gave their name, email ID, and phone number. So the kind of communication that would go out to that person would be a lot more aggressive. We would also talk about discounts and pricing, etc., at some particular point in their life cycle journey. We also used to have a separate series of drips called cold lead drips, which were for people who used to sign up for our blog pages, right? Who used to register for a webinar, download an ebook, for example. So for a lot of these leads, we used to have something called as a cold lead drip, which also used to go out. These were called cold leads because these people are not really looking to make a purchase decision with you. They are just having a passing interest in digital marketing. They're just having a passing interest in data science. They're not looking to spend money with you. But these are what I call rainy day prospects, because these are not people who are going to convert in the next 1 or 2 months, but these are people who will convert to you if you engage and nurture them with subtle communication. You shouldn't scare them away by talking about 20% discount codes, because these are not people looking to purchase. If you can engage and nurture them with high quality content over 6, 12, 18 months, you will start actually reaping benefits from these cold leads. So to begin with, the traction through a lot of these efforts will be low, but these will start having a snowball effect over a period of time. The other was what I called as drip emailers, dead drip emailers, right? That's something that we also used to have, which we used to use specifically to go after consumers whom we wanted to reactivate and refunnel, right? People whom the sales team had tried their best and given up on. How do I refunnel them back into the marketing funnel? That was the dead lead drip. The last is, of course, the repeat drip. How do I get my existing customers, my one-time transacting customers, to come back and repeat transact with me? That was again a specific focus of the repeat drip emailers. With that, we come to the end of the presentation, guys. If you guys have any questions, any feedback, please put it up here in the Q&A section. I would be happy to answer them.
Yes, so we have some questions that are in the Q&A box.
Sure, let me just open that. Okay, Chetan's question, what's your opinion on digital workout from home apps? And also what would be the best way to monetize it? Please throw some. Okay, sure. So essentially, so at Healthify Me, what we essentially used to provide, as I said, Healthify Me as an app is perhaps, so there are multiple ways in which you can sell health solutions, right, Chetan? One is obviously you can look at a nutrition-led approach, or you can look at a fitness-led approach. So Healthify Me as an app, as a brand, we were focused and anchored more towards nutrition, because we fundamentally believe that whatever you do from a workout perspective, nutrition is a primary determinant of your health. But we also provided fitness advice and fitness solutions. And right now, both Healthify Me and CultFit are seeing a huge bump up, especially due to COVID. For a lot of their solutions, Cults, their gyms are actually suffering, but they've actually managed to pivot, and they're providing a completely digital offering now, very similar to a Healthify Me. So Healthify Me has over 10 million users now. We've expanded to Southeast Asia as well. It's a freemium app. Most of these users are free, but we have an exponentially growing base of consumers who are actually picking up premium subscription plans, who want to work with health nutrition coaches, nutritionists, fitness coaches, yoga instructors, etc. Go through the entire health plan online. So we're seeing a significant uptick there. So the short answer, that's a long answer to your question. The short answer is there is a lot of opportunity for you to monetize. At Healthify Me, as I said, we had a freemium offering. So the way to monetize it is, as I said, you need a very strong free hook. In Healthify Me's case, the free hook was calorie counting. We have the world's largest database of health Indian foods, which are mapped to accurate calorie counts. So we have over 50,000 foods. So even if it is an exotic dish from Kashmir, Kanyakumari, Mizoram, Assam, Gujarat, whichever corner, Lakshadweep, Andaman, whichever corner of the country, you would have an accurate calorie breakdown for it. So that's the hook which brings people in. That's the free one. And then you look for ways to actually monetize once you've built a very strong captive audience. Yeah, I hope that answered your question, Chetan. Shubham's question. Shubham's next question, your advice to an edtech startup on how to survive and grow when many big and new players. Okay, sure. So let me take your first question. Shubham's first question is, what do you do? Because there are new players jumping in with deep pockets. If you're a young startup starting up today, how do you grow your business? The way to do it, Shubham, is you pick up a niche which is underserved. Let's say you want to provide digital marketing training online now, it's going to be very tough if it's a very generic solution. But let's say that you're going to provide specific solutions on, say, Instagram advertising, for example. You're going to coach people. Let's say you are ex-Instagram, you're ex-Twitter, and you're actually going to teach people how to make Twitter advertising work for them. Right now, that is a niche which a Simplilearn is not focused on, for example, which say an Upgrad is not focused on, for example, which say a Byju's is not focused on. So you pick a particular niche and you go deep there. That's the way to crack it. Number two, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, of course. I think the key way to crack this, Shubham, is you look for unique kind of content. Let me give you an example. At Healthify Me, one of the most engaging pieces of content that we always used to have was Instagram Lives. Right, so wherein we used to get one of our top nutritionists actually coming in on Instagram, and they used to do a live session talking about, and they would take live questions from people on, let's say the topic would be something trending, right? Something about crash dieting, the dangers of crash dieting, what is keto diet a fad or is it a reality, for example, something like this, right? Is vegan diet good or bad for you? Things like these. And then they would have live questions coming in, and that would promote a lot of engagement despite the clutter on Instagram. And we used to do something similar on Facebook. Yeah, that's a way for you to look at it, Shubham. I hope that answered your question. Ankit, that's a very good question. Are email still an effective way of marketing? I've been hearing this for a while now, that email is dead, right? People say that people don't check emailers anymore. Email is good for product lifecycle notifications, but not so much for marketing. I've been hearing this for a while now, but I still see emailers as something which has a future if you can do it right. If you can make sure that you customize your emailers and you don't send one size fits all emailers, and this is still an effective way of marketing. You've got to make sure that you give yourself a chance of landing in your primary inbox. That is the key thing. Because if you're going to land in the promotional inbox, it's going to be very tough. But you've got to give yourself a good chance of landing in the primary inbox. Again, there are multiple ways to do it. Make sure that you maintain a very conversational tone in your email. It should almost appear so that you can fool Google into thinking that's an email which is coming from a friend. So don't talk to your consumers like a brand is talking to a consumer, but talk to your consumer like a friend is talking to them. Reduce your, or rather increase your text to image ratio. That's another thing for you to keep in mind. Cut down on the visual elements, cut down, don't send heavy emailers, send them maybe 1 in 10 times, but the remaining 9 times send plain text emailers. A lot of Silicon Valley brands do this really well. A lot of Indian brands do not. So have a conversational tone, increase your text to image ratio. All of these increase your chances of landing in your primary inbox. And there are people who are let's say, Keyur hates my emails. Let's say Rishik hates my emails. Both of them ignore all of my emails. I'm just taking a couple of random names. They ignore my emails. Make sure that you remove them and you don't continue to spam them. Because if you are continuing to send emails to people who are ignoring your email, let's say Pranav, you love my emails. Even my emails to Pranav will start landing in promotions and possibly even spam, because Google looks at me as a possible spammer. So make sure that you keep continuously updating and refreshing and filtering your email list as well. That's another important thing for you to keep in mind. Anik, I hope that answered your question. Yeah, Rishik, I think whatever I just mentioned, I think that will address that as well. Because as I said, make sure that you've got to make sure that there are people who are ignoring your emails, remove them. So something that I always used to do is people who have not opened my previous 2 successive emailers, I will not send them a 3rd email. Right? That's something which, because even in email, like in SEO, you have something called as domain authority, which is very important. So let's say that I am sending emails, the name of my company is say my name itself, or let's say my razorpay.com is my domain. And if I'm continuously sending emails to people who are ignoring my emails or who are unsubscribing from my emails, if my unsubscribe rate is pretty high, if my open rate and click rates are fairly low, then all the mail servers are going to look at the Razorpay domain, the Razorpay's domain authority is going to come down. So my deliverability, even to my consumers who actually love my email content, that will start going down. So that's something you've got to keep in mind. Make sure that you refresh your email list. One quick rule of thumb, remove the previous 2 email unopeners from your email lists. That's something for you to keep in mind. Is there any other platform where we can do free marketing as like Google SEO? A great way for you to drive that, Mukund, this PR. Right? How can you, a lot of Indian entrepreneurs do not, in my view, focus enough on PR, building good relationships with folks in media. So how can you make sure that you can create newsworthy sound bites, package information in a manner that is appealing for the people in media? To me, that is a great way. I hope that answers your question, Mukund. Next question is about startup. Yeah, somebody had a question. Keyur, was that you?
Yeah, no, we can take next question.
Oh, sure. So this question very quickly, I think what you are looking for is tips and trips to pursue your hobby in a commercial level. I think what you could look for is read up on digital marketing and entrepreneurship. I would recommend a person called Neil Patel, Neilpatel. He gives a lot of great information. I'm personally a big fan of this man. I would recommend that you read up a lot of his content. He gives a lot of great content. The other person I would recommend you read up on is Guy Kawasaki. Guykawasaki, a Japanese person who settled in the United States, lives in Australia now. Fantastic entrepreneur, digital marketing thought leader. He's written a lot of great content. I would recommend these 2. Mobile SEO, Anjali, as I said, AMP is the baby step. Mobile SEO is about what do you do from an SEO perspective to make sure that your mobile websites, your content is actually amenable for mobile searches. And one of the basic prerequisites, the foundational building blocks that need to be in place is AMP. Make sure you have that in place. Next question, where to look for content writers who understand drip and email automation. So content writers, Nick, if you have the capability, I'm assuming you run a startup of your own. If you have the capability to hire content writers of your own, do that. Else there are enough and more platforms available where freelance content writers are available. There is Upwork. There are so many different platforms where people work by the hour. Very professional platforms. You can look at that. There is even a company called Wordplay in India, which you can also try out. Vaidehi has a question. What kind of strategy should you adopt for overseas customers? Vaidehi, the strategy is very similar to what I mentioned earlier. So for example, even at Simply Learn and at Healthify.me, a significant percentage of our customers, if not a significant, a material percentage of our customers actually came from overseas, right? And we used a combination of Google plus LinkedIn again to actually acquire them. We used primarily digital to actually go after these consumers. The only thing you've got to be careful about is, especially if you're going after sectors like, say, the United States, for example, where culturally they are very different. The prospect is very different from the Indian consumer persona. You've got to make sure that your communication is relevant for that particular consumer, right? One of the biggest case studies for success for a homegrown Indian SaaS-based company which has successfully sold and has acquired consumers from over 100 countries is Freshworks, right? A company that I personally admire a lot, and they've done a really good job of this. And they essentially grew through customer word of mouth, customer referrals, plus a combination of Google and LinkedIn, right? So something for you to keep in mind. So Amit has a question: how do you convert the likes on your social handle to potential customers? One way to do it is integrate Facebook chat with your website's chat and with your CRM system itself. So anybody who chats with you, a lot of your likes and people who chat with you on Facebook, if you can get that to actually feed into your CRM, that's a great way for you to do it. Or run contests on Facebook, which actually incentivize participation, which are seen by your followers. For example, you write a slogan writing contest and you say that the first, I need your email ID and phone number, go to this particular landing page, submit a slogan, and I will get back to you. So you can't directly convert them into customers, you can at least convert them into leads by using hooks like these. Right? For example, run a contest on Facebook. Raj has a question. He has a healthcare product. Healthcare, Raj, as I said, it's going to be primarily, I would suggest you begin with Facebook. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of this product or a platform called PregBuddy, right? PregBuddy. It's been started by one of my ex-colleagues and it has over 2 million customers now. Essentially, it's a platform for pregnant moms. And it's grown with zero marketing spend, right? It's grown from 0 to 2 million with zero marketing spend. It's won a bunch of awards from Google, from Facebook, from Apple. And it essentially started off as a WhatsApp group. And it's a watering hole for pregnant mothers, right? Across various trimesters. So it's broken out by pregnant moms in Bangalore, in South Bangalore, who are in trimester 1, trimester 2, trimester 3, trimester 4. So it has extremely high engagement. Plus, there is a lot of churn because once the mother goes through the 9 months and delivers the baby, they churn out of the app. But you have fresh people coming in as well. So there's extremely strong engagement. So that's something for you to look at. So customer referrals, word of mouth obviously goes without saying. But the biggest thing is occupy a niche. So PregBuddy essentially occupied that particular niche, which was underserved by not looked at by a Healthy Family or a Cult Fit, by any of these big players. So they picked up that space. But leaving that aside, like in the case of a Healthy Family, Facebook was the strong one, which actually worked well for us. Repurchase customer base, again, I think one of the biggest ways for you to drive repeat purchase behavior is to sell subscription offerings, subscription plans. That essentially is what we did. At Razorpay, a lot of marquee Indian brands, the Ken, Netflix, a lot of them use our Razorpay subscription services. To me, that is a great way for you to drive repeat consumer behavior. Next question, Abhishek, what should we consider? So Abhishek's question is, what should you consider as cost of acquiring a customer? How much should you actually spend? One quick rule of thumb, Abhishek, a pure dhanda driven rule of thumb is you consider not, if you're having a business where your cost of acquisition is more than 30% of your average selling price, then it's something for you to look at. I would suggest that for a healthy business, it is usually sub 30%. So that's something that I would recommend. That's a good question, Prashil. The data with a Healthy Family is only as good as the data that the users enter it to be. So we are still dependent on that. But what we also do is we also look at a bunch of user vital signals apart from the data that the user is directly entered. We have the ability through the tracking device that we provide, with the user's consent, of course, we have the ability to be able to track various vital signals. And we have the ability to be able to triangulate the information which has been entered by the user. Yeah. Rishik has a question: why doesn't Google itself do business by sending their own coach employees, having expertise in marketing in Google itself? That's not the simple answer to that, Rishik, is that's not Google's area of focus, right? Google's in the business of making the world's information universe accessible to humanity. That is their vision. And their monetization play there is through advertising on Google search. Doing anything else, training, etc., goes against Google's core focus. Prashil, I'm not able to follow your question. Please do clarify. On a validation of It's a good question. Should we go for a web app versus a mobile app? I think a web app is easier to launch, so you might want to launch a web app to begin with and then convert it to a mobile app. But a mobile app is certainly way better in terms of driving user engagement, in terms of driving stickiness. For you to have a locked-in captive audience, a mobile app is certainly better. I hope that answered your question. Rahul Punch, for a travel startup. Yeah, I was hoping I had answered that question, Rahul, when I gave you that rule of thumb. So if you're a travel startup, so I used to lead marketing for a travel startup before my adventure with EdTech started. And that's a startup that shut down, but it was doing really well for a long time. It took Series A, Series B funding as well. So we, for a long time, focused primarily on SEO, because if you're in travel, SEO is the primary thing. Travel is huge in India, or at least was prior to COVID. I don't know what's going to happen to the travel ecosystem now after COVID. But I'm talking about a world pre-COVID where travel is as mass as it gets, right? Travel ecosystem is extremely competitive with global MNCs like Booking.com, and you've got a lot of homegrown players with deep pockets, GoIBO, Make My Trip, etc. Everybody's coming in, ClearTrip, and so on. So and you have a lot of consumer demand. So SEM is the number one. So when I was leading marketing at this travel startup a while back, I used to spend most of my day on Google AdWords, and followed by Facebook and the rest, everything else, SEO, etc. Yeah, and cold leads, yes, it is important, but not so much in travel, because you've got that certain urgency, and the product market fit is already established. And you don't need to, while education is important, it depends on the kind of product you're selling. If you're selling regular hotels and rooms in hotels, cold leads, not so much. But if you're selling packages, if you're selling experiences, then cold leads and nurturing them becomes that much more important. Rishik has a question, rather not sending email. I'm not sure I follow your question, Rishik. So I assume your question is there a more engaging platform for you to engage with consumers rather than email? I'm assuming that is your question. So as long as you can make sure that your email content, Rishik, is personalized and it is not one size fits all, then it still works. It's not just talking about 20% discount codes, but it is actually adding value for the reader, then it actually works. And if, say, you, Rishik, has actually clearly conveyed to the business that you're not interested in their communication and the business does not continue to spam you, then it still works. Yeah. Vichar, I hope I answered your question earlier. This question came up earlier. Jaimin has a question. Thank you for that, Jaimin. I guess it just comes from experience and a very strong first principles driven thinking, and wherein you actually question the status quo. I think that's where the clarity can actually come from, and trust your instincts. I think I answered this question as well. Whoever asked this question earlier, I think I had recommended a couple of people, Neil Patel and Guy Kawasaki, two people that I particularly follow. I think these are people that you can also refer to. A bunch of questions on the chat. Let me just open that. I think Monopoly question I answered earlier. I think it's been answered. What is Razorpay? I think Razorpay's question also I have answered earlier. It happens to be India's leading, one of India's leading payment gateway providers, which allows businesses to be able to receive funds. We also allow businesses to be able to pay out funds to vendors, to employees for employee payroll processing. Plus, we also offer working capital solutions. Is Facebook's data research reliable? For the most part, yes, it is reliable. So Facebook's data is fairly strong. As I said, at Healthify Me, it is, and I guess it will continue to be the number one dhanda driving platform because it provides the ability for you to, for example, I can specifically target, I can use testimonials of middle-aged people who are actually suffering from hypertension, and I can specifically target this, say, middle-aged gentleman living in Nagpur, for example, who is suffering from, say, a hypertension. Or I can use testimonial videos featuring younger people, who are, and specifically target that 20-something or that early 30s person living in a Mumbai or in a Bangalore who's looking to bulk up or who's looking to get a six-pack ab, right? So that level of targeting granularity is actually possible through a Facebook, which even a Google can't provide. So in that sense, it's pretty amazing. Jaimin's question, I think, are answered. Pranav, I'm assuming my rule of thumb in terms of how you prioritize, SEM versus Facebook versus LinkedIn, etc. I think that's something that we can look at. How to develop great business instinct, I think that's also been answered. I think with that, we come to the end of the questions, guys. Any other questions any of you have? I would be happy to answer them. Anything from you, Keyur? I think Harshil has a question. Harshil Patel. How can we set up security of the customer's data? I think that is something that your technology stack has to ensure. That's a great question, Harshil. I think something that you've got to ensure is that all of your marketing and your product intelligence, which actually looks at customer data, is only looking at what you call anonymized customer data and anonymized customer data only. At no point should people's personally identifiable information, as it's called, be readily accessible for marketing or for product. So as long as you can ensure that your technology stack needs to ensure that all the information is anonymized, is only available at an aggregate level. That's something which is very important for you to keep in mind. For a SaaS B2B focusing on SMBs in US, does having a US entity versus an Indian entity matters much? I mean, from a pure taxation perspective and from an ease of doing business perspective, a US entity possibly makes sense. With you possibly having the execution being done out of India. I think I personally know of quite a few Indian SaaS-based companies which are based in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, in Ludhiana, in Lucknow, which essentially provide a whole host of solutions to international customers only, right? Customers living in US. A lot of them are based, have built their stacks on Shopify, and who are essentially providing a lot of solutions to customers living in US, Australia, UK, Europe, etc. A lot of them are domiciled primarily in Singapore for taxation purposes, in some cases US. Very few of them are actually domiciled in India. I hope that answered your question, Nick. But of course, their workers are all based in India, so they're all run by Indians. So that's something for you to keep in mind.
So, Nita, participant has a question which is filled in the RSVP form. Can I take that one?
Yeah, sure.
So, he has a unique ERP product which is ready to be launched. So, what are the first 2-3 steps that he should take to acquire customers digitally?
The first thing is, if you have a unique ERP product, one of the biggest things that I would recommend the person do is to validate the product market fit. Which essentially means you've got to figure out who are your first set of 100 customers who would be willing to pay for your product. I think that's the first thing which you've got to do. Ideally, in an ideal world, I don't know if the product has already been built or they are in the process of building the product. Assuming, say, you are still in the process of building the product, what I would do is to launch something called as an MVP, or a minimum viable product, right? Which is something which can be taken to the market really quickly, which essentially is fairly representative of what the final end product would look at, and get that validated by prospective customers first. In terms of get some critical feedback on the product from these customers, get to understand if this particular product services any of their existing need states, or is this a product that is not servicing a market need at all. Get some of these initial questions and assumptions validated with prospective consumers. Then go out, once you have your initial product built out, make sure that you get your first set of early adopter customers. Right? That's the first thing which you've got to look at. And this is always the toughest thing for any business. Because it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. It's very easy to talk about customer referrals, but if you have no customers, or if you have less than 5 customers, where are the referrals going to come from? So the key thing there is to make sure that there are like multiple kinds of media that any given startup needs to focus on, right? There is what is popularly referred to as organic media, which is the kind of exposure you give to your product, your brand from your own presences, your own website, your own Facebook page. The second is paid media, wherein you actually spend money. I've got 100 followers on Facebook. Now I want to spend money in garnering another 1,000 followers, right? So actually that is the incremental exposure you get for trying to sell your product to another 1,000 people who are not your followers is paid media. But historically, a lot of Indian brands, especially early stage Indian brands like yourself, like most of the people here on this panel, do not spend enough time on is something called as earned media, right? Wherein you actually try to earn media and gain incremental coverage and exposure for your brand through the strength of the content that you create. Let's say you've got 100 Facebook followers, but you create a blog post in, say, the same ERP space itself, which is so amazing. Or you create an infographic, which is so amazing that 50 of those 100 Facebook followers end up sharing it on their respective feeds. And let's say each of them again have 100 followers each. So you get an incremental exposure of 50 multiplied by 100, 5,000 people without you spending a single rupee. So the short answer to your question is focus on creating earned media. which one of the great ways to create earned media is through social media shares by creating some fantastic content to put your brand out there before you start spending money. Yeah, I hope that answered that question, Keyur.
Yes, wonderful.
Anything else, Keyur, or from any of the participants?
So there is one open question by Harshal, if you would like to answer that.
Sorry?
There's a question on
Keyur?
Hello, Veda, are you able to hear me?
Yeah. What are there any other questions? Oh yeah, there are some more questions coming in. Harshal has a question: free delivery of products or paid delivery? How can it? Free delivery or paid delivery? It's an interesting one. I think it's a question of messaging. I think Amazon has done this really well. Wherein Amazon has actually said, if you're interested in free delivery over a period of time, pick up my Prime subscription. All of your deliveries are free. You get it within 1 day. Plus, you also get access to great content, right? They've managed to crack that. But if you're an early stage startup, it's going to be very difficult for you to crack that piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So as long as I said, the product that you're offering is fairly niche, is fairly bespoke, is fairly custom, is adding value to the customer, and the percentage that you're actually asking, the fee that you're actually, the delivery fee that you're actually asking from customers is a small fraction of the entire product price itself, it should still be all right. I know it may not make business sense. Saying provide free delivery is the easy answer to provide, but it may not always be practical. It may not always make business sense. Which is why I go back to the earlier statement of, as long as the product that you're providing is fairly niche, is fairly bespoke, and the percentage and the delivery fee as a percentage of the overall product cost is a small fraction, it should still be all right if you charge for delivery. Yeah, hope that answered your question, Harshil. Saksham has a question. How can we make people aware of new products and make them buy than existing products similar to it? I think, Saksham, very similar to some of my earlier responses, wherein if you can make sure that you clearly communicate what is unique about your new product. A lot of brands make the mistake of talking about product features and not necessarily consumer benefits, right? So you've got to talk about what is the benefit that your product brings to the consumer. What is the pain point in the consumer's life that your product is actually doing away with, right? So you've got to abstract away a lot of the complexities of the product features. Customers don't care about features, right? They only care about the benefit that the product actually brings to them. So if you can focus more on the consumer benefit, talk about the specific pain points that your product actually helps alleviate for the consumer, that is a key way for you to communicate, and focus on creating earned media. As I said, if you're an early stage startup, spending on Google, spending on Facebook, etc., may not always be practical, right? Because you're not VC funded, right? You're bootstrapped for the most part. So focus on creating high quality content which can make people sit up and take notice of you, which can create earned media for your brand. One of the great ways to do it is through social media shares. Yeah, hope that answered your question. I think there's another question on chat which has come up. Cool.
I think we are done now with the questions.
Cool. If there are no other questions, then thank you once again to all the participants. Hope you guys enjoyed this session as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I wish you all the best, with all of your different startups. I hope all of them grow to be multi-billion-dollar businesses someday. And a big thank you to GeoSec and to Keyur for the opportunity. Back to you, Keyur.
Thank you, Veda. So with this, we would wrap the session. But before wrapping it, we are coming up with. It's on Thursday morning, 11 o'clock. It's the fireside chat with Niladri Mazumdar. He is the president and COO of Seeker Watch India. So stay tuned for that event. And if you want to register, you can go onto our Facebook page and find the event and register yourself for the seat. So thank you, Veda, for taking out the time and helping all the entrepreneurs out here. And thank you to all the participants for such wonderful questions and attending the session. So with this, we would wrap the session. Stay home, stay safe. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Keyur. Thank you, GeoSec. Take care. All the best. Stay safe. Why?